The next speaker has been in the front lines in the fight against impunity and bringing perpetrators of mass atrocities to justice. She's also the legal representative for Ms. Murad and other Yazidi genocide survivors. And I now give the floor to Ms. Amal Clooney.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the sponsors of this event for inviting me to address you once again at the United Nations. 6 months ago, I came here to discuss the need for accountability for crimes committed by ISIS. I spoke to you as the lawyer for a group of victims of ISIS's crimes, including Nadia Murad, who as a 21-year-old girl was enslaved and raped by ISIS militants in Iraq. My message to you was that ISIS is a global threat that requires a global response, and that response should not be limited to the battlefield. The UN should also investigate ISIS's crimes and make sure that those who are responsible are brought to justice. Since my last address, I have supported the United Kingdom's initiative to have the Security Council set up an investigation into ISIS crimes in Iraq. This would allow the UN to work alongside Iraqis to collect evidence of crimes on the ground and identify specific individuals who are responsible for them. So over the last few months, I have met with officials from Iraq, the EU, the UN, and members of the Security Council, including the Russian and US ambassadors, to discuss this initiative. All of them told me that they support the idea of a UN investigation to be established by the Security Council with Iraq's cooperation. So the UK took an admirable leadership role and drafted a short resolution to make this a reality. This draft was presented to Iraq many months ago, and Iraq has since consistently and publicly expressed support for the initiative. As recently as October, the Foreign Minister of Iraq, Mr. Jafari, confirmed Iraq's commitment to, quote, a campaign led by the UN that would include action to gather and preserve evidence of ISIS's crimes. The Iraqi government is aware that a one-page letter to the Security Council requesting the investigation would be sufficient to trigger a vote on the resolution. But months have passed, deadlines set by the UK have come and gone, and the Iraqi government has declined to send such a letter. So there has been no vote, no resolution, and no investigation. Now, the Security Council could, of course, act without this letter. It could establish the investigation without Iraq's consent, acting under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. It could refer the case to the International Criminal Court. The General Assembly could establish an accountability mechanism, as it did for Syria this past December. Or the Secretary General could launch an investigation. But none of this has happened. Instead, mass graves in Iraq lie unprotected and unexhumed. Witnesses are fleeing, and not one ISIS militant has faced trial for international crimes anywhere in the world. So I am speaking to you, the Iraqi government, and to you, UN member states, when I ask, why? Why is it that nothing has been done? Could it be that these crimes are not serious enough to warrant an international investigation? No. ISIS is today the most brutal terror group in the world, representing what the Security Council has called an unprecedented threat to international peace and security. ISIS has carried out or inspired attacks in more than 31 countries that have killed more than 2,000 people outside Syria and Iraq in the last 3 years alone. Inside Iraq, ISIS has attacked victims from every community, including Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, and Christians. And ISIS has made clear that it intends to destroy Yazidis like Nadia completely through killings, forced conversions, and rape. The UN has already concluded that ISIS is committing genocide against this group, and there can be no more serious crime. The UN was created as the world's way of saying never again to the genocide perpetrated by the Nazis. And yet, here we are, 70 years later, discussing the UN's inaction in the face of a genocide that we all know about and that is ongoing. So is it that the political interests of powerful states are standing in the way of accountability? Perhaps this is why, over 2 years after the genocide, not one ISIS member has been brought to trial for it. No, that is not it either. As a human rights lawyer, I am often told that my cause, while commendable, cannot succeed because of political realities. We have seen the Security Council paralyzed over Syria, or the road to the International Criminal Court obstructed when powerful states block council action. But here, ladies and gentlemen, we are dealing with ISIS. Not one veto-wielding member of the Security Council is on their side. No one claims to respect or protect ISIS. And yet, somehow, we are no closer to justice today than when I addressed you last year. Could it be, then, that the crimes of this nature are simply too difficult to prove? No, that is not the reason for inaction either. ISIS is a bureaucracy of evil, leaving behind it a trail of evidence that nobody is collecting. It has kicked bodies into uncovered mass graves. It has set up a, quote, committee for the buying and selling of slaves. It has set up courts to legalize the purchase of women as property. It has kept detailed forms about its recruits that include their name, phone number, address, and previous terror experience. ISIS militants have even sent Nadia messages on her phone, taunting her that they still have her family members in captivity. They don't bother to hide their phone number when they do so. They know that nobody is looking for it. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, what is shocking here is not just the brutality of ISIS, but how long those who know about it can remain passive. If we do not change course, history will judge us, and there will be no excuse for our failure to act. We cannot say that ISIS's crimes were not serious enough. We cannot say that the interests of powerful states stood in the way, or that these crimes are too hard to prove. That's why I'm asking you today to stand up for justice. Every conflict reminds us that there can be no lasting peace without justice. So killing ISIS on the battlefield is not enough. We must kill the idea behind ISIS by exposing its brutality and bringing individual criminals to justice. Justice is also what the victims want. Ask the families of the American hostages Jim Foley and Stephen Sotlov, who were beheaded by the ISIS militant known as Jihadi John. When Jihadi John was reportedly killed by a drone strike, their families said that they would have preferred it if he had been arrested. Stephen's family said that they wanted to, quote, sit in a courtroom, watch him sentenced, and watch him be sent to prison. Yazidi women like Nadia say the same thing. They want their chance to face their abusers in court. They want legal judgments to be published so that their genocide cannot later be denied. And they deserve nothing less. But justice will forever be out of reach if we allow the evidence to disappear, if mass graves are not protected, if medical evidence is lost, and if witnesses can no longer be traced. Excellencies, it is not too late to turn things around. I believe there is a common will among those in this room, among leaders in Baghdad and capitals around the world, that ISIS should be held accountable in a court of law for its crimes. What is needed now is moral leadership to actually make this happen. Last week's US State Department report on Iraq reminds us that the vast majority of serious human rights abuses being committed today in Iraq are being committed by ISIS, and that all Iraqis, Sunni, Shia, Christian, Yazidi, are its victims. So today, I wish to speak directly to Prime Minister Abadi. On behalf of all ISIS's victims, I call on you to send the letter to the Security Council requesting an investigation into ISIS's crimes. Getting the UN involved was initially Iraq's idea, and finally taking action to make this a reality would silence those who doubt your commitment to bring Daesh to justice. And finally, to all of the UN member states, if this road to accountability through the Security Council is blocked, you must take the initiative to secure accountability in other ways available to you under the UN Charter. Don't let this be another Rwanda, where you regret doing too little, too late. Don't let ISIS get away with genocide. Thank you.